Good evening, I'm Savannah Kelly. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. The Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly wrapped up in Ottawa on Thursday. After a day and a half of voting, a new national chief was finally announced. Here's Annette Francis with that story.
They entered the room together in a show of unity, Cindy Woodhouse and David Pratt. After handshakes and hugs from chiefs and supporters, and after 6 rounds of ballots and hours of deliberations, Pratt made his way to the stage to announce he would concede.
But I knew that it wasn't doing our convention any good to prolong it. When we're facing a housing crisis, when we're facing a suicide opioid crystal meth epidemic in this country, when the jails continue to be filled with our people from one end of this country to the other.
Pratt told the chiefs in assembly, "We leave here united," and with that, he introduced the new national chief.
Our next national chief, Cindy Woodhouse Neepanak.
It wasn't an easy ride to the top. Woodhouse held on to the lead from the first ballot, but never made the 60% threshold to win outright. Following the 4th ballot, there was a tense moment when Woodhouse confronted Pratt.
Yeah, we get that.
And I still work for them.
You said you would concede.
But after 2 days of voting, she made the pledge.
I solemnly promise and sincerely pledge to fulfill these duties as they are outlined in our charter to the best of my abilities.
Woodhouse told media there's a lot of work to do. A priority is getting to work on the critical issues like housing, infrastructure, homelessness, and access to affordable homes. She's prepared to work with all parties and levels of government.
We need solutions and we need to work together and to make sure that especially First Nations on reserves are not overlooked when we're having these national conversations in this country.
As one of the lead negotiators for the First Nations child welfare compensation deal with the federal government, Woodhouse says families are a priority.
We need to push to bring our families home together again, to make sure that we're giving families the supports that they need on everything that they need. If you're giving a foster family all this support, why don't we give our First Nations those supports to make sure that they have strong and healthy families once again.
Woodhouse also promised to bring unity within the Assembly of First Nations. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And to another election, after 3 hours of questioning from members of the Legislative Assembly, the Premier for the Northwest Territories has been elected. Our reporter Charlotte Morit-Jacobs brings us that story.
It's a big day in politics north of 60. Members of the Legislative Assembly are in Yellowknife selecting the Northwest Territories' next Premier, Speaker, and Cabinet. At the last minute, MLA for Nahunde, Shane Thompson, withdrew his candidacy for Premier, opting instead as the only candidate to put his name forward as Speaker. Thompson says even though he won't be raising issues directly as often, he can get his constituency heard.
That's exactly what your role is. Being the Speaker is an honor. It's an additional role, but you're MLA, and you need to represent that, and you need to respect that your constituents are going to be working. I have 17 issues ready to go. I'm just waiting to see who the new ministers are, and then I will be working with them on that. So.
The 3 candidates running for premiership include MLA for Range Lake and Yellowknife, Kieran Tetstart, MLA for Yellowknife South, Carolyn Wozniak, and MLA for Hay River North, RJ Simpson. Past Premier Carolyn Cochrane is also in attendance, with this advice for the new Premier-elect.
The most effective leader, in my opinion, is those that will take the opinions from all around, especially on tough decisions, and try to find a solution that will work, that will be acceptable for all members instead of just like, it has to be my way. And never leave the table. You will have problems as the Premier. There will be relationships that break up. People will be angry with you for a day or two, but never leave the table.
After hours of questions, all 19 MLAs are voting by secret ballot.
Thank you, members. Your Premier-elect is Mr. R.J. Simpson.
Still a bit of shock, but I'm excited. I think we have a really good crew, and we made a lot of progress in the last government and working with Indigenous governments, and I think that really is the future of the territory, building those relationships so that we can really build up the territory and the regions.
RJ Simpson is Métis from the small South Slave community of Hay River. He says he plans to start work right away.
We got to be more willing to go to Ottawa with Indigenous government, shoulder to shoulder. So I think that's, that's a way to really bring a lot of money and resources into the territory. And there's been a lot of desire from the Indigenous governments to do that as well. So, we're moving into a new era of partnerships, and it's exciting.
It's also the first time since 2011 that the Premier has been elected from outside of Yellowknife. Simpson, who held the Education, Employment and Culture portfolio along with the Justice portfolio, says he's ready for the challenge.
Over the past 8 years, I've really learned the value of working with people, and that's the only way to get things done in our consensus government system and in the territory where we have multiple governments all across the territory with different capacities. And so working together, collaboration is going to be the hallmark of it. We're no longer in an era where the N.W.T thinks it's the boss and is doing everything. We have to work together.
This afternoon, MLAs will vote on cabinet ministers. 2 from the northern districts, 2 from the southern districts, and 2 from Yellowknife. The Premier will then hand out portfolios at a later date. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Just over 1 year ago, we learned about the deaths of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and the as-of-yet unidentified Buffalo woman. Police announced the remains of the 3 women may be in Winnipeg area landfills. Since then, there's been a fight to search for the women. As Tamara Pimentel reports, 1 year later, families are still waiting for answers.
Family and friends of Morgan Harris gather 1 year to the day after her death was announced. This is where a vigil was held last year, on December 1st, 2022, outside the former home of the alleged serial killer who has been charged for the murders of Harris, Rebecca Contois, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo Woman. For Morgan's daughter, Cambria Harris, not much has changed in the year.
My mother, Morgan, she's my waking thought every single day when I wake up and before I go to bed. My mind's been in an endless cycle 24/7 for the last 365 days.
Contois' partial remains were found in the Brady landfill in June 2022. And 1 year ago, police announced the deaths of Harris, Myron, and Buffalo Woman. They told the public their remains may be in the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg. That sent ripples through the Indigenous community as a call to search the landfill caused tension between supporters and the Manitoba government. A camp for Morgan was set up outside the Brady landfill in December 2022, with Camp Mercedes following suit outside the Museum for Human Rights. Those camps are still active today.
This last year has been probably the hardest years that I've ever had to face in my life. It was 1 year ago that mine and my family's life had changed forever, and it's not changed in a good way.
In October, newly elected Premier Wab Kinew met with the families to discuss a search, but a date has not been confirmed. Morgan's cousin, Melissa Robinson, says all the family wants is closure.
Here we are exactly a year later at the exact same time, still mourning her. Still just as sad as we were 1 year ago. And why is that? Because we haven't been able to lay her to rest.
Cambria wants the public to remember Morgan as a fun-loving mother who faced intergenerational trauma.
It's important just to recognize the hardships that Morgan had to face throughout her life. I want you to remember her as a loving mother of 5 who fought hard to get her voice heard.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A Yukon Supreme Court judge has delayed sentencing for the man who pleaded guilty in the 2019 death of Kaska woman Mary Ann Oley. 66-year-old Philip Atkinson pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the death of Oley in October. Judge David Gates says the 9.5-year sentence put forward by the Crown and defense, known as a joint submission, lacks information on Atkinson's background. The judge ordered both parties to provide more information on Atkinson, including a GLADU report and pre-sentence reports. The sentencing has been tentatively delayed until January 24th. Ottawa has begun consultations on the creation of a red dress alert system for missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. MMIWG advocates have been calling for such a public alert system for years. The MMIWG Inquiry's final report, released in 2019, also calls for the establishment of a national number for missing Indigenous women and girls. Marian Buller is the former Chief Commissioner of the MMIWG Inquiry. She says she's happy Ottawa is finally setting up a red dress alert system.
We've been told several times at the National Inquiry that the first 24 hours that after a person goes missing, those are critical times for collecting evidence, tracking people down, spreading out contacts to try to find people. So it's a really critical time, and so much evidence can be lost if that investigation isn't started right away.
An Alexander First Nation man was shot and killed by members of the Edmonton Police Service last weekend. APTN's Chris Stewart was at a candlelight vigil held Monday. A warning: video of the incident may be disturbing to some viewers.
In a statement, Edmonton police say they were called to 100th Avenue and 111th Street about a report of a man brandishing a knife. It reads that a confrontation occurred and an officer discharged their firearm. The suspect died on scene. Police have not identified the deceased, but a photo at the memorial shows that he is Kelvin Cat or Kent from Alexander First Nation near Edmonton. The incident was partially caught on video by a neighbor. It shows 4 officers demanding a man get on the ground. He continues to approach the officers, who moved away. He looks to have been tasered and falls to the ground. The video is obscured at this moment. A few seconds later, what sounds like 6 shots are fired. CPR is applied, but the man dies. Edmonton police say a knife was recovered at the scene. On Monday evening, a candlelight vigil was held at the site of the shooting. Jordan Reeves was a friend of the deceased.
We've never known as this individual to be in any source of being violent or belligerent to anybody. He has a son, and now he's left his son alone now because the police have took him. I'm getting a little emotional, so I don't know what more I can say, but something here isn't being seen right.
Edmonton police declined to comment on the incident, saying it had been handed to ACERT, the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, an outside independent organization. Reeves says he wants proper justice for his friend if police wrongfully shot our Kent.
People need to be accountable for their actions. As our citizens are accountable when we have to go through court systems, they should be held accountable under the same systems.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team is asking anyone who may have witnessed this incident or may have video to contact their investigators at 780-644-1483. We need to take a short break. Coming up, a new app hopes to address language barriers in healthcare for Inuit in northern Quebec. Welcome back to APTN National News Weekend. In the north, the Council of Yukon First Nations is one step closer in making an Indigenous healing centre a reality in the territory. The organization signed a letter of intent on the centre with the federal and territorial governments in Ottawa on Monday. The building will include 6 beds for those needing immediate care for issues like substance use. It will also include 20 beds for longer-term stays. Grand Chief Peter Johnston says the centre will help alleviate pressure on Whitehorse's downtown emergency centre.
From government, the long-term to help not only finance this, but also to give us the ability to provide a healing center to our own people on behalf of our people, just provides another option, which I think is the most important aspect of this whole conversation.
Communicating symptoms to a doctor can be critical, but what if your first language isn't English or French? A new app hopes to address language barriers in healthcare for Inuit in northern Quebec. Amelia Fournier has more.
Head.
Tukisiutik, a new app, hopes to help Inuit and medical staff understand each other. Healthcare workers and Inuktitut speakers from Nunavik, Inuit territory in northern Quebec, contributed to a digital glossary of medical terminology in Inuktitut, French, and English. With a few clicks, you can identify body parts, symptoms,
heartburn,
and pain levels,
worst pain possible,
and communicate with doctors or patients.
I will request a urine test.
Dr. Nathalie Boulanger has worked in healthcare in Nunavik for around 30 years, where the population mostly speaks Inuktitut, followed by English. But healthcare workers mostly speak French or English.
Quelqu'un qui ne se sent pas bien, surtout les elders ou les petits-enfants qui ne parlent aucun mot de français ou aucun mot d'anglais, qui se présentent à l'urgence. Là, c'est difficile de savoir qu'est-ce qui se passe exactement. Tu sais, tu peux pointer ton abdomen, mais c'est-tu des intestins, c'est la diarrhée, le foie, en tout cas. Fait qu'on allait un peu les yeux fermés, finalement.
She helped come up with the idea of the Tukisiutuk app to make communicating easier for everyone.
I put myself in the place of a patient, and I think I would feel a little bit more reassured if I was able to convey part of what I want to say and make sure that the person I'm telling it to understands exactly what I'm trying to say.
This app was spearheaded by the Nunavik Regional Board of Health and Social Services with support from Health Canada and the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer. Boulanger says she hopes other health boards follow Nunavik's lead for other Indigenous languages, including other dialects of Inuktitut spoken out west.
Plus on monte au nord, plus les langues sont vivantes. Ça fait que je me dis, ça serait le fun si les gens pouvaient être inspirés, puis on serait très content d'être copiés, mettons.
To download the app, search Tukisiutik, Tukisiutik, in the App Store and click Get. Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
An Edmonton nonprofit is raising money to help youth who need services due to family and community problems. They say demand is outpacing their services. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
16 emergency beds, so we were talking about how we want to remove shelters, the concept of a shelter.
Margot Long is the president and CEO of YES, Youth Empowerment and Support Services. They have provided services for youth 15 to 21, such as emergency shelters, mental health services, help finding permanent housing since 1981. Long says that demand for their services has been skyrocketing. She says nearly half of youth who come here are Indigenous.
I'm seeing about 30% increase in the mental health crisis of young people coming into the center, and we're in a collaborative of 27 youth agencies. So we're seeing a rise in the number of youth that are experiencing homelessness and crisis from domestic violence, mental illness in the home, whether it's theirs or their families, and a lack of support.
She says the 3 levels of government funding has not kept up with the increase in demand for their services, and agencies are all fighting over the same insufficient pool that is available.
Youth are a very, very small part of the focus and of the funding. At a national, provincial, and municipal level, youth agencies aren't at the decision-making table. They're getting less than 1% of the funding and the focus.
This week, they began fundraising with a goal of $1 million for a unique plan.
So what we're trying to do is advocate to get rid of youth shelters and to create instead small community help centers with a couple beds and 24/7 support, but to minimize the crisis for youth, for staff and community, and really instead look at how do we get into community and support youth there.
A plan that could change many lives for the better. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We need to take one more quick break, but when we come back, a well-known Cree Métis actress has been inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. Stick around. Welcome back. Cree Métis actress Tantu Cardinal has been inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame in the Arts and Entertainment category, which recognizes individuals who have contributed significantly to the industry. Cardinal is known for bringing Indigenous representation to the movie industry. Her nearly 50-year career includes over 120 roles in various film and TV and theater productions, including Dances with Wolves, North of 60, and most recently a role in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. She's also a member of the Order of Canada for her contributions of Indigenous performing arts. Staying with the arts, the Aboriginal Film Festival is underway in Winnipeg for its 22nd year. This year's event includes Indigenous productions from across the world and has a record number of Inuit films. Tamara Pimentel has more.
This year's Winnipeg Aboriginal Film Fest features 40 films from around the globe, with an Australian production kicking off the week-long event. The New Boy is a story of an orphan who is brought into a Christian monastery where he begins to question his faith and heritage. A common story that needs to be told, according to the festival's program director, Jim Compton.
I think it's important to showcase all of our films because we all have a story to tell, and the stories are similar, and we need to get those stories out there so that we can reconcile with the colonial governments that put us where we are.
This is the festival's 22nd year. From blockbusters like Killers of the Flower Moon to shorts and comedies like Hey Victor, Indigenous stories are shown on the big screen at Winnipeg's Scotiabank Theatre and other venues across the city. And this year marks a record year for Inuit films with 6 entries.
There is a renaissance going on right now in the world of Indigenous filmmaking. For the first time in, many, many years, well, for the first time ever, if you turn on the TV or you go online, you can see Indigenous actors in not only in TV shows, but in movies, in films, and probably like a record number of us being reflected back on the screens. And also, it's really decolonization of film because we are in charge of telling our own stories, finally, which is what we've been all about for 22 years.
Colleen Rajat is the executive director and a filmmaker. Her short comedy, Pickerel Sandwich, will be featured as well. It's part of a web series called Amanda's Choice.
Amanda's Choice is about 60 Scoop survivors who are career women in Winnipeg, and it's about their search for love and happiness, and it's kind of like, the way I describe it, is kind of like a native Sex and the City.
The Winnipeg Aboriginal Film Festival will be on until December 10. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
That's all the time we have for your weekend edition of APTN National News. For news anytime or to catch up on our stories you may have missed, head over to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Savannah Kelly, Marcy Miigwech, and thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great night.